Yes. Yes. Go. Yeah. Don't worry about it. And I've posted the slides to our course website as well. So if you want that, and someday we may end up with the video as well if I ever figure out how to make all of that work. Eventually I will. At least I can now get video from here and onto my computer. And that's a good thing. There we go. Okay, on then. Okay, on then to the next major area, the two traditional forms of Western ethics with their moral implications. So, Kantian deontology. Our textbook looks at these, so there's a great deal more. If you're attracted to it, there's a whole chapter in our textbook. I hope you're not attracted to it. It's powerful stuff. It's the backbone of Western civilization in terms of ethical models, for some very good reasons. But it's not adequate. That's the problem with it. It's not that it is bad in itself, it's just that it's not adequate. And so it has a great competitor, which we'll look at on the next slide, utilitarian ethics. But that's not adequate either. That is, and it's increasingly recognized. One of the problems with our textbooks is that just in terms of academic ethics, it's out of date. There's been a lot of work done because Kantian deontology and utilitarian have been widely recognized as inadequate for a long time. The problem is trying to figure out what is adequate, and we don't know. But these are well established. If you're going to do a PhD in ethics, you're probably going to do it in one of these two. Don't do a PhD in ethics. Or do a PhD in ethics, just don't do it in these, but you'll have trouble finding a university program that will allow you to do it. Okay, so Kantian deontology. One of the two key schools in traditional philosophical ethics. That is, there is a quest to find a method. Okay, so this is ethics, it's method. That applies to all people, everywhere, all the time. Shouldn't it be true that we can find a way of determining, method, what is right and what is wrong in every single human situation? Shouldn't there be one? If God is one, or truth is one, or the universe is one, I don't care what the basic principle is, there should be one method. So Immanuel Kant, German, 17 whatever, came up with one, and through very careful reflection. It's brilliant set of insight, which is treat others the way you wish to be treated. And any of you with any religious understanding at all will recognize that that is one of the near universals of human religious history. Almost every religion argues exactly that. But Kant said this is not religion. He said this is philosophy. This is truth in a way that gets outside of human beings, their culture, their environment, their experiences. If we simply use this one principle, we can always, everywhere, do good. Okay? And a lot of religious teachers would say, yeah, not bad. Believe this as well, but yeah, this is the way you act. Follow this rule and you will act appropriately. Now, deontology, deon means duty. And Kant said, since this is a true principle, you have your first moral duty then, that is the content, your moral duty is to live that way. If it's true, then the requirement is you behave that way. So now we're into content. So this is why this is a completely methodological question that leads to a moral statement. You must do that. Okay, then it gets tricky. what exactly is the way I'm treating others the way you wish to be treated? That's hard to know in terms of the practical details. Okay? What is the right thing to do in a particular circumstance that would reflect what somebody else would like to have happen to them? That you would like to have? Well, we don't know what the outcomes will always be. Yeah.
Because maybe somehow we want to treat in a which way that the other one don't like to treat that way.
Oh yeah.
Yes.
Absolutely. We'll get there. Yeah. Yeah. Do we always want to be treated the same way?
No.
No, we don't. Kant would disagree with you. He would say, yes, you do, your desires are not well formed. Your understanding of self is not well formed. But that's a different issue. We'll get there in a moment. But what he says is, because we can't always know what the outcome will be, we have to then know that the intentions are right. So we must always intend rightly. We must always intend the well-being of others. That is, we can't actually treat others the way we wish to be treated because we don't know. Life is unstable. Things can happen. Therefore, what we can do is always intend to treat them well. So now we're into the details of how Kantian deontology works, which is about the structure of intention. How do we construct our world so that our intentions are good at every level? And the consequences are in many respects irrelevant. That is, if the intentions are all set up correctly, we've done what we can. Life will determine the consequences. We don't know. And we literally don't know. We can't know. Kant doesn't worry about it. We don't know. We can't know. But what we can know is what we intend. And if we all know what we intend, we can start building on that. And from that we end up, though Kant doesn't go there, we end up with the human rights tradition. The human rights tradition is all about intentions. We don't know what a human right is going to look like in any particular situation or culture. All we know is it's an intention about how people should be treated. That is, they have a right to be treated in a certain way that reflects our intentions of their worth, their value. And if you're ever interested in this, read John Rawls' A Theory of Justice. It's an extraordinarily good application of this whole framework to build the contemporary liberal state, the liberal democratic state. John Rawls is probably the best articulator of that framework, what makes it work. And if you start understanding this, you realize that Europe, Canada, and the United States are just filled with this framework, that this is the way that governments try to operate. Doesn't mean they succeed, but from Kant's point of view, you don't have to succeed. You just have to intend. So in particular, the courts are very much tied up with this because they are the arbiter of our intentions. So in fact, if you're interested in Canada, you can kill somebody, but if you didn't intend to do it, it's not murder. Okay? It's only if you intended to kill them. Otherwise, it's an accident. It's manslaughter, it's unintentional murder, but it's not that full criminal murder because you didn't intend to do it. The intentions count, not the outcome. People are dead. It's your intention. I planned to kill them. Okay, now you're guilty. Which is a hard thing to recognize. There are many cases where people make accidents, do things wrongly that result in bad things happening, but they didn't intend to do them wrongly. Therefore, there's no criminal charge. They may have done a bad thing, but it's not a criminal thing. That's the way our system is set up, and it's all rooted in this framework that intentions are what are vital. It's intentions that guide us. It's intentions that we can hang on to that make sense. And the great alternative is utilitarianism. The utilitarians cry bunk to all of Immanuel Kant's work. The utilitarians say, if we can't assess the consequences, what is the point of anything? That isn't the point an improved quality of life? Isn't the intent to create better conditions for human beings? Does it matter that you intend human conditions to be better if you do not succeed in making conditions better? Right? So the utilitarians took a very different approach. They think, and the philosophical utilitarians are pretty much convinced, they can go everywhere that Kant does and do it better. That is, by looking at consequences and evaluating consequences, they can come up with a universal method that applies to all people, everywhere, all the time. Okay? They're all about the same thing. They're about the universal ethical method. And their principle is, you must act in such a way as to maximize the good outcomes. In every situation, do what you can to maximize good outcomes. And that requires skill, intelligence, learning. It even requires good intentions. Hey, we can get to all of Kant's stuff. But our concern here is not the intentions, the inner state. It's what did you accomplish? Because we don't care if you wanted to help somebody and you ended up killing them. We're concerned you killed them. Okay? Don't treat people with poisons when you're trying to heal them. Okay? But there are people who believe deep inside themselves that they need the poison in order to be healed. Okay? No. Utilitarian says, we work backwards. What heals people, you give them that. You don't give them anything you believe or intend or think. You do what works. So very closely tied then to empirical thinking, scientific thought, rational analysis. Let's look at the evidence, people. What works? Let's do more of that. That is the only right thing to do. Intentions, who cares? You'd better intend only one thing. Maximize the good outcomes. Right? So they've got a nice principle, produce the greatest good for the greatest number of people. Of course, oh goodness. If you can't find problems with that, you aren't thinking very hard. But then you've got to come up with an alternative, and their argument is, well, then you have to go over to Immanuel Kant, and you have intentions, and who cares about the outcomes? At least we're concerned about the best for the most, even if that means horrible things happening to some people. So we may have to starve a few people in order to feed all the rest. Happens.
What if something that we think is a good thing for other people is not good thing for them? You know, I think it's a good thing, but maybe they think that it's not good.
Yeah.
So in this case?
So a utilitarian says, we don't care what anybody thinks. Let's measure and find out. Do what is measurably better for people. That's our standard. So you might think one thing, they might think something else. Let's sit down and talk about it. And let's check in with some experts. Let's talk to some scientists. Figure out what's really going on to the best we can so we make the best judgment we can based on what really works. Lots of problems in that. What's the boundary condition? How many people get to be hurt so that we can save the rest? And there are lots of exercises around that. I hate them because they're theoretical. But there's lots of evidence that people are quite happy to kill one person to save 5. But they're not so happy to kill one to save 4. Okay? That is, there's internal math in our heads about the way we do these kinds of trade-offs.
So from this point of view, rational is the most important things.
Absolutely.
And they focus on the result. When
That's
the
right.
result is fine, nothing matters.
That's
but
right.
the previous one, ethical, more involved, yes?
Well, both of them are ethical systems. One focuses on intention. What did you plan to have happen? Did you wish well? Did you intend well? The other says, it's an ethical system, says, did you design it to act well? But they're about the how. Okay, what neither of them tells you, let's see where this next slide goes, yeah. The problems. There are deep problems with both of these. Well, the first one is neither of them is the way people actually make decisions. Okay? So that's the simple one. Most of our decisions are actually made by habit. I'm deeply convinced that training people in habits is actually the best way of building a better world. We can come up with good habits and train people to behave habitually, or create systems that make people behave habitually in the correct way, we will solve problems. So for example, I don't know about you, but I rarely have problems driving on the wrong side of the freeway. I'm habitually oriented to following the signs, and everything is set up so I just go one way and I end up on the freeway traveling in the correct direction. I don't even have to think about it. I've done the right thing. The processes, my habits, work together and good things happen. Okay? But it gets much deeper. So moral content is deeply contextual, so that it doesn't matter if you're Kant or Locke, the great philosophers of deontology versus utilitarianism, you're wrapped up in a culture that explains that certain things are right and wrong regardless, and your method has to get there regardless. Okay? Kant has been accused, I don't know if it's accurately, but there's a certain truth to it at a certain level, that he's simply reflecting Western Christianity, that his intentional system works really well with that cultural mindset, but it doesn't work well with other cultural mindsets. Whereas utilitarian approaches are much more reflective and work well, particularly in terms of Asian contexts, where people are prepared to make much more difficult trade-offs around human life and well-being, looking for that better outcome for the whole. I know. Well, that's, okay, it's the culture. But regardless, whoa, here's some problems. What is a human? Immanuel Kant, what is a human being? Well, depends. It's obviously a European male, probably of German origins. That's a true human being. After that, it's iffy. Are women human? That is a tough one. There are lots of cultures over history that have argued that women are not fully human, that men represent humanity and women are defective men, so they're not fully human. Yeah.
They are angels. They are angels.
Oh, they're angels. They're higher than men. Oh, great. Yeah, okay. So they should be making the moral decisions and men are inferior. Huh? Okay. Yeah, and regardless of whether or not women are human, are men and women morally different? Are they intrinsically morally different? Again, this is a very difficult question. In utilitarian terms, it doesn't really matter. In Kantian terms, it really does. The tradition, Western liberal tradition has said, in fact, they're not morally different. The utilitarian folk have said, well, hang on. The very fact that one can give birth and the other cannot has really significant outcome results. We need to take that into account. What does it mean morally? Difficult. What is the meaning of death? Well, there is one that neither system can handle. That is, it's a cultural, contextual, religious statement about fundamental meaning in life, and it's important. Is death the end of all things or transition to something else? Well, that changes profoundly the way we assess both intentions and outcomes. What is the appropriate treatment of animals? Are they merely use creatures, or do they have intentionality to the degree that they are like human beings? Do we need to treat them kind of as parahuman in Kantian terms, or as utilitarians, can we simply say, they're just critters, doesn't really matter. We treat them the same way we would treat, machinery, it's not a problem. So we can see that there are very different answers to some core questions that we would all like to have answered.